But you and I both hit show at the same time, so I hid what you showed. There we go. We're back up. All right. Well, without any further delay, I think we're going to start 5 minutes early. Let's jump into this IRGames experience. What do you think about that, Kyle? Sounds like a good idea.
I think we need to kick ourselves to the wings and let the great Bob Miller show us why he's the great Bob Miller.
Let's make that happen. Let's get all the folks involved here. Man, I just get so happy seeing all these amazing people too. Like, I know you, I know you, I know you, I know you. So Bob, I'm going to turn it over to you. Maybe just start with some intros and then I'll let you all get it kicked off. Nope, you're muted, brother. Let's see if I can unmute you.
Let me know.
There you are.
All right, there he goes. I saw it. Hey, my name is Bob Miller. I am a COO at a MSSP in Louisiana called Global Data Systems. And, you know, we're involved in, working in the ecosystem, and I've met Wes and Kyle and a bunch of people over the years and worked on a lot of projects with them. But the main thing we're here to do today is that working with Matt Lee and Ethan Tancredi, or two guys that are in the ecosystem as well. We did a physical desktop exercise that was a incident response exercise, and we were crazy enough to put that online, and that's what we're going to be playing with today. So that's probably enough background for me, but I'd sure like for Tom and MacKenzie and Drew to kind of introduce themselves, please.
My turn. Okay, as I thought, I didn't hear. Tom Lawrence, as Wes mentioned, I have a YouTube channel where I try to bring educational content, and a lot of it's from all the real world experience of being a tech. I also, when I'm not hanging my hat as Lawrence Systems, I work with Jason Slago, which is another name you might have heard in the industry, over at CNWR doing solutions design. And that is also the feedback loop that brings forth all the data I put on the YouTube channel.
Very good. MacKenzie? I don't hear MacKenzie. Do you guys hear MacKenzie? We can't hear you, MacKenzie.
Maybe we'll let Drew go while she's troubleshooting.
Yeah, go ahead, Drew.
Yeah, no worries. So I'm Drew Perry. I'm definitely not in the cool space as everyone that I've listened to today. It's been an amazing day to hear some of the takeaways. Definitely the spicy takes. But I, as you can see, my background is still under construction. You guys are miles and years ahead of me, but day to day, I lead information security for Serta Simmons betting. Like Wes said, we make the best bet you'll ever sleep on. And now when I go to conferences, when I go to events and I talk about these things, everybody likes to ask the question, what keeps you up at night? I get to tell everyone absolutely nothing since I got a Beauty Rest Black. So hit me up on LinkedIn for a friends and family discount. Absolutely anybody.
Drew, can I ask you a question quickly?
Yeah.
Because I've had this conspiracy theory for years where anytime you drive by
wait, I know what you're gonna ask. You're gonna ask, are mattress stores front for the mafia?
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay. I've got some great information I'll share with you that is not for public consumption. But the short answer is no. They're just really boring.
I thought they were money laundering schemes.
I mean, somebody mute MacKenzie again.
It was my best to see if the mute was fixed, and I switched.
Oh no, it's working. Go ahead, MacKenzie.
Hi, MacKenzie Brown. Clearly, it's Friday, and I didn't know. I should have just gone and poured myself a bourbon. These people in the chat were talking about it, but hello, yeah, MacKenzie Brown. So VP of Security over at Blackpoint Cyber, but I'm actually transitioning into a different role here. We just haven't formally announced it, but I'm taking over the Adversary Pursuit Group, or APG team, which I'm really excited about because that's the team where we get to blow some stuff up, essentially. And that is the Threat Intelligence and Threat Research team at Blackpoint. We work within the Threat Operations Center. But prior to that, I was in the trenches of murder cleanup zone of incident response. I spent 4 years at Microsoft as an incident manager on the detection and response team, or DART. So did fantasy football, putting teams together every single week of tons of cases and putting them all over the world. And anything you've seen in the news, DART's probably had their paws on at one point. So.
All right, very good. MacKenzie, I sent you. You should have got an email from creative demos or something. So if you click, if you get a chance, you can click on that.
And then, Bob, while you're getting everything going, just so everyone knows in the audience, this is a game that you can actually run yourself with your own MSP. You can also run it with your clients. And so what we're going to do today is we're just going to be in the audience, and we're going to be watching over the shoulders of 3 security pros. Well, really 4, because Bob, you're in there too. 4 security pros I deeply respect. So this is not the normal way that Bob runs an incident response with this game. But we just thought this would be a fun way to get a bunch of folks all exposed to how cool this thing is. And then we'll make sure to get links over if anyone wants to try this on their own. And love to get feedback from all of you as you jump in.
Yeah, but I'll tell you this, because everybody's a CISO with me on this place in this particular activity. I knew that I was probably breaking about 700 rules. First of all, I sent you an email with links in it, and then there was a PDF in it too. I sent that to you the other day. I was going, they're going to tear me one side to another about that, right?
Oh yeah.
And their filters are going to grab it and strangle it and kill it, and so we will work on something a little more secure to be able to get onboarded to this game. But it is really a pre-version 1 kind of a game at this point. You'll notice that when we get going. But when you do click on it, you should be on a browser. You should have a browser, separate browser window, and that browser window is just for you, and it's your view of the game. So that's how that works. And I'm going to share. I'll share mine, and Wes, I can just share, right? So don't worry.
Yeah, it should work for you to share. Yep.
Okay. All right, let me do that. Oh, that's a different share. Where is it on here? There it is. Gotcha.
And Wes, we might want to jump ourselves to the wing.
Yeah.
You'll be able to hear us though.
That's okay. You guys should stay in the mix. So.
Oh, don't worry. You can hear us, but you can't see us. Should I put on some AI music while you're getting the share going?
You guys will have to tell me. You can see that, right?
Yeah, we got it. Except it's just yeah.
It's waiting for the game to start, but I'm doing that. I'm doing that on purpose, right?
Okay.
I want them to be able to click on it. If you guys got a browser window that looks similar to that at this point, Drew and Tom, MacKenzie.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay, good. All right. So I'm gonna wave my magic wand and tell my guys to go ahead and start the game. And so we should see the game start here. So here we go. So this is day 1. So here is the telemetry we're getting. So and I will tell you that the way this works is there are different roles at the top. You know, you'll notice by RC Bob, I'm the CEO, so I'm going to have a particular view. Each one of you will have a different view depending on what role you're playing. So if you look right under the name of the room, you'll have a role. There's also this little area that's a configuration that says, okay, well, it looks like we have published SLAs. We're part of a peer group. We enforce overtime. We have a policy on technician wellness. We're well-documented procedures. No, we don't have well-documented procedures. Documented incident response plan. No, we don't have that. So those are configurations.
Like every this place, I worked there. I guarantee it. Absolutely.
Yeah. So every game, this configuration is random. Even if you're in one big game and there are different rooms, these are all different. So, and then these pieces down below here are the actual pieces that do the work. We'll be talking about that in a minute. But right now, our dispatcher receives a call that a single application is not working at Innovative Financial, a small investment firm. Innovation Financial relays that their system is not working. The technician is scheduled to look at the remote server remotely. The client contact calls back to say their desktops are not working either as well. And a note is popping up. Upon digging in, your technician is presented with a ransomware note upon access and notifies their service manager. So this is what we've got. This is where we're sitting in this particular scenario. This scenario is kind of an MSP-based scenario. So we are acting as an MSP, and this is one of our customers that's in the field. And so this is the telemetry we got. And so to give you an idea of how the system works, there are different scenarios from different perspectives. This is a MSP perspective, but there are also enterprise-based scenarios for things like business email compromise. We're going to be presented with the dialogue. So here we go. It's these are questions or prompts that we ask the contestants discuss. So I'm going to put it out for us. What would you do at this point if you had that telemetry? What would you do for Innovative Financial right now? Give a technical and a non-technical action. That's over to you guys. What would you say?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I probably get a sample set of what ransomware they're looking at and see if I can do some sort of attribution to ransomware type and operator group.
Yeah.
To look up TTPs related to that, which every MSP does.
Right. Yeah. The other question here is like, do we know if Innovation Financial has an IR plan? So if we're an MSP, that's a good question for MSPs is, okay, do we know? Do we know if that customer has an IR plan? Go ahead, MacKenzie.
Do we know? I think we do. Or do we know that they don't have an IR plan, or we don't have an IR plan for the rules?
No. Oh, we documented at the top, our configuration for our MSP is that we do not have an incident.
We don't have an IR plan. Okay.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So
and then
the question here is, do we know?
Ooh, I don't know. So I guess technical and non-technical action. Technical action, again, kind of seeing if I can gauge more information from the ransomware itself. This is me going back into dark days, picking up a lot of calls like this. And then I would ask them if they know if they have any domain controllers that are safe and secure, or that they could isolate immediately, that they know haven't been hit. So any systems that they have to contain, essentially, and pull offline. And then I would ask for information on their backups and whether or not those are segmented or connected. I mean, these would just be initial questions because those are the things that are going to make them make recovery probably possible. Non-technical action, I would ask if they have a cyber insurance policy and who their lawyer is. Because those would be the people on the call next.
Insurance and lawyers, and telling everyone to shut up. No one talks about this. That's yes.
And a confidential agreement, NDA, bam, all those things immediately. Where I pull out. I guess I'm sure that as an MSP we have some MNDAs in place and BAAs, but not an IR plan. But we probably have the other ones in place.
Yeah, definitely. As part of the scenario, we drag all that out into the open because we do need to ask those questions, right? Do you have a good solid MSA? So those come later in the scenarios we kind of move. Anybody else want to jump in, Tom?
I was going to mention too, making sure in scope, like what does that user have access to, or what is that system in terms of the critical nature of it? Can we just turn it off? Cloud hosted, internally hosted? Is it authenticated SSO with everything else with that user? So what level of permissions and what is the impact zone that that incident creates?
Yeah, so here's some more, it escalates. So we got some more dialogue going here. You now receive calls from multiple clients claiming the same thing. Now you have desktops have ransomware and servers are inaccessible. So your phones are starting to be.
I was going to get a non-technical answer before it got to this one, because I was going to say we need to update our IVR to say your call is very important to us. We will get back to you as soon as possible.
Yeah, because, well, you wouldn't have been wrong. Absolutely. So the phones now are starting to ring, constantly busy. Your dispatcher is unable to keep up with the call volume. Multiple people at each client are reaching out every way they can, and your voicemail continues to pile up and clients are calling technicians directly. Not that any MSP has allowed their engineers to give their personal cell phone numbers to the customer. That never happens. But in a situation where you do, then they're getting called one-on-one by those clients, as well as our closest and largest clients are calling your personal cell phone, just asking you what in the world's going on, right? So this is where it starts getting a little bit more. So you got more information. How does that change how you go about what you're going to do next, MacKenzie?
Call your lawyer.
Yeah. Go home. It's Friday.
Yeah.
Get bourbon out.
If there's no IR plan, we probably also don't have a communications plan that's correlated to that IR plan. But we've already have general counsel, hopefully at this point, looped in, and they'll create, and of course, insurance. And this was an argument we had in IT Nation Secure last year of who do you call first, and it should be your lawyer before your insurance, to be honest, because you're going to want your lawyer on the phone when you are talking to your insurance rep as well. You don't want to be alone, but they can help create a communications plan, and ideally you do out-of-band communications of what's appropriate information to disclose. That would be a good one to hopefully calm down some of the calls. Probably wouldn't, but
yeah, I don't think most people know you should have your own incident coach association with an attorney, because there's a difference between that one and the one that's assigned to you by the underwriter. If you have cyber insurance, right? So that's what you're really talking about, Ms. Kinsey. You need your asset who's concerned about you in the discussion first. Because once again, you want to establish that client attorney privilege, but you also want to be able to control that conversation as it relates to the underwriters. And that's best done with a lawyer to lawyer in a lot of cases. So I agree with you 100%. We're about to switch over. We're about to get some more telemetry here. So this is just day one, right? So we're just getting telemetry in. We got real problems. Multiple clients have been affected. So here's some discussion points. What are you going to do next? Now that you have that extra telemetry, and MacKenzie, you alluded to this by calling our breach coaches thing. But what are some of the technical things you might do next? You guys have input on what you would go down that route?
Yeah, try and identify what applications were compromised on your side to figure out, because obviously you're the MSP, multiple of your clients are now hit. One of your applications was broken. Was it you that broke it, or was someone compromised your credentials, or is it an incident where the tooling itself, the company that manages the tooling, had an incident and it's spreading out? So starting to contact your vendors and get that underhand to figure out where the problem is coming from, so you can mitigate it as fast as possible and start working with the vendor in the incident that it's actually a vendor problem.
Yeah.
Is that a spoiler alert? I feel like it's a spoiler alert that maybe we're the problem in this situation.
Well, it's definitely
my therapist would say, like, maybe we're the problem here. We don't.
This is where I kick into isolation, right? One of the things, working as in my day job as a customer, not an MSP, where I joke about the big red oh shit button, right? Is that I want a set of firewall rules and controls that are pre-configured yet disabled, that in the event of something going crazy, what's the minimum level of access we can continue to run the business on, so somebody can hit that big red button and basically drop the gates at the castle. So whatever is running rampant, we can look at. So we saw it come in. We saw complaints from a single customer, but now we're seeing it through multiple customers. There is this flow that if it's not everybody yet, how do we keep it from being everybody quickly without knowing what it is we're dealing with?
Yeah, very good.
And since we don't have a documented incident response plan, we definitely don't have a big red oh shit button. So
yes, absolutely. 100%. Anybody else? And these other two questions are more for MSP kind of related folks. So, I mean, how many of you have dealt with a multi-site customer incident of this scale? Which I guess that, have any of you had to deal with that, where you had a situation where you were either working for someone that or you were assisting someone? MacKenzie, you'd probably be the biggest target on this, right? Where you're trying to assist.
Yes, I have. Yes. And I can neither confirm nor deny some of those are saying.
No, right. You can't give us the name, but I mean, so they do occur. I guess that's the whole point of this, right? These large scale incursions occur, right? We all, well, some of us went through the SolarWinds incident, right? So that was a multi-site, threat for us that we had to go and actually try to prosecute. So it does occur. I mean, more often than people actually hear about, obviously. So. And then how many of you dealt with an incident with a single client ransomware? That was another discussion. All right, so here we are. We're in the tech phase of an incident response plan. You're aware that the likely culprit is something that you own, which is us, right? You're not able to respond yet to the client until you bring on resources to determine the cause. This is what you guys were referring to about insurance and counsel, forensics, and negotiating teams, which we're going to refer to in this case as the panel. That in some cases, for certain insurance carriers, these are prearranged assets, right? And that you're interacting with them. They're bringing the panel online to kind of get you going. Your admin users are all flooded with communication from all sides. Each is telling clients some or all or none of what's happening. And I think one of you mentioned the fact that if you do not have an IR plan, the odds of you having a communication plan are slim to none, right? And
tell everybody to shut up. That's at least, if you don't have a plan, just tell them to shut up.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and you've been instructed. So here's the thing: if this is impacting your systems too, then you may not have the ability to pull up a list of all your employees and all their email. Maybe your email server is affected in this process as well, right? So thinking through what are you going to do if your assets are taken off the playing field? What backup mechanisms do you have in your plan to allow out of band contact with those people? Because you're right, telling your people to shut up is just as important, right? It's just as important as trying to figure out what's going on, because they're dialoguing with the customers, and those one-to-one contacts. They can easily say things like the word breach accidentally because they don't know the difference, right? So comm plan is really important in that case. You have been instructed by the response team of your IR firm that your RMM that is hosting in AWS is the culprit. So worst case scenario, we've got a RMM that's been impacted, and it's what they use to actually do the pull this off. Your customers are demanding a reason why nothing has begun happening. Your technicians are busy, been disconnecting entire sites from the internet where possible in the chaos to prevent double extortion of the data theft. You've got 10 techs, they're all in chaos, all being called by their favorite clients, all answering in various answers. Some of them even use the B word breach. This is what we were talking about. Your trouble ticketing system's offline, and it was ransomed as well and was running on the AWS environment. Legal counsel asks that you do not restore machines until the date and time of the first access is determined, and the investigations on possible footholds commence by the forensic team. And then you have your first conversation with the ransomware negotiators who are ready to discuss with the threat actor should the need arise. So there you go. So with that telemetry, anybody got any comments about where we're at now? So
I would make sure that we start isolating things, not shutting them down to preserve forensics, but just isolating them so they're not spreading whatever they're spreading. Stop further ingress, stop egress of data if that's the potential. What else are they exporting? What are they pivoting to?
Yep, absolutely, 100%. So containment. This is what you're talking about, right?
Yep.
So Surefire has determined that the threat actors deployed ransomware with RMM tool, and they believe there was no access prior to the movement of detonation. You can contain the threat by taking the RMM offline, and do so by not rebooting, which is exactly what you were just saying, but by pulling internet connectivity in this case at the AWS network layer for all affected assets. Across the board, PSA, RMM, jump boxes, firewalls, network monitoring. You are finding it impossible to coordinate with clients because you are gathering contacts and other vital information from emails and other technicians' cell phones because you didn't have an out-of-band list to work with, right? So, and then now we're on to, well, this is the moment you've been waiting for, because we're going to start responding to this. The insurance panel is giving your team the marching orders on what can be done. Surefire has asked you to pull a copy of volatile memory. Again, exactly what you guys were saying, for our affected servers in AWS. And in your wisdom, you did not have an open configuration VPN or dedicated transport to any other asset on location. We'll ask why that's important in a minute. And then your IR firm, after 1 day of investigation, determines that there's a persistent foothold on every machine that was deployed at the time of detonation. And they're all going to require wiping and reloading of assets. So we're about to get into the firefight here, right? So that's our basic telemetry. You'll notice this timer is relentless, right? As we're kind of rolling through.
Yeah.
We're kind of rolling through. And MacKenzie, bad news. You're the tech lead, so you're going to be assigning resources here. Yeah, I know. So this is a grid, right? Yeah. So what I would tell you to do, the pawns are techs, right? And they can basically restore 8 servers or 4 workstations in a day. You have to restore the servers in this scenario before you can work the workstations. There's a little plus sign on the right side of your screen where I'm hovering over here. There should be a plus sign by those pawns. You can only assign 1 per line. Go ahead and do the first 8. I just go down the line and click a plus by each one of the first lines, since we only have 3 minutes to allocate these resources. There you go. So as you can see, as you're doing that, it's taking the resources off the personnel line. So you have a finite number of resources to do that with. And like I said, the basis of the discussion here is that you need to get these servers up before you can work the workstations. And sometime when you ask me why that's the rule, I'll drag Matt Lee in front of you, and you can persecute him about that. But he has his because his definition was, well, you got to get the servers up before you can, be able to figure out what the configs need to be on the workstation. So there's some logic behind why these have to proceed in this order. But when I tell you that the allocation phase of this is relentless, it really is. And I think, let me see, who's the CFO? One of you is the CFO. If you look up at the top by your name, it should tell you.
That's me. I mean, don't ever put me in charge of the money.
Yeah, well, so you get the full view, which is similar to what I have here. You've got the money view, right? So as a CFO, you're going to be given guidance. I'm the CEO, so you and I should be giving guidance to MacKenzie about who to allocate these tech resources to, and how we're going to prioritize, how we're going to bring all of these resources back up. That's something that a lot of MSPs or enterprises in general haven't thought about, is if it goes worst case, have you prioritized who you're going to restore first? How are you going to allocate your resources?
Yeah, I like that it also has the MRR in there, because it's not necessarily the determining factor. People will sort by that, I'm sure. But honestly, things like, to me, right away I see like healthcare. That is something that has to be right at the top. I have numerous friends that work at top level healthcare companies, and they dealt with the recent breach. That kind of stuff is total chaos, and it's real human lives.
Yeah, if you'll notice on my view, I have how many years we've known these people too, how long they've been a customer. As a CEO, that might even be a consideration about, okay, well, not to mention oil and gas, state government, what's critical infrastructure, what's not critical infrastructure. Yeah, that's all logic that you have to weigh in, right? So and you've got about 24 of these different customers. So there we go. That was the allocation phase. So every day we're going to have a 3-minute allocation phase. So we have to be thinking how we want to direct that as we go. And so we get to this discussion point. So if while you're restoring these servers, which, again, this happens all the time, and server restoration fails, what's your process? What should be included in your process when you get to that point? That if you got a server fail, what should be the next thing you do?
Ensure that you have backups or some sort of gold image. That would be useful for those before you start testing, and then a rollback plan if those continue to fail.
Yeah, very much so, right? And that's the other thing. So this next line is, okay, well, what if you got those images, but the restoration still fails? Because of course this never happens. Backup software has a flaw in it, right? And cans your backup image. When do you notify the client, right? When would you go about notifying the client about a server restoration failure and what that really means?
Not till things are exhausted. One of the things I'll generally tell the backup techs is download the image file. That way, if it fails, we're not re-downloading the image file. We're not repeating work. Also, hey, if you can, grab a secondary, grab yesterday, 2 days ago, 3 days ago image file. So we have a couple different options to try.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Well, and how many don't have a golden image, right? Because that's a thing that I've run into throughout my career, is that, we have really good backups and we test them regularly, but the farthest we go back now is a quarter or two. There's nothing from a year ago or 2 years ago, or like MacKenzie said, a golden image from, God forbid, like day zero. There would be nothing. If restoration fails, how many of our customers can't be restored, period?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, I got to give a shout out to Wes, because it's cheating playing this game with you guys. Because that is all killer, right? I mean, it's like there's nothing to correct, right? I mean, you guys are covering every one of the bases that are really need to be considered with this, right? So it's
since we've all been through this.
Yeah. Well,
I would want to figure out server types, like what specifically those assets are, because it's not just some backups, but I'd be concerned if some of those were Active Directory specifically, or domain controllers, things that you need and then also ones that have classified or regulatory information on them. So if they're file servers, also ones that could be file servers that are compromised, that if you do bring them back up, they maybe hopefully aren't any sorts of staging of backup persistence mechanisms that are living on them that could be easily kicked back and executed.
Yeah, and MacKenzie, I don't think most people have, again, you're talking about, you should have an IT assessment, and you should know which one your top servers are, right? Which ones you really need to be worried about first, like you're pointing out. So
in our incident response plan. That's
in our non-existent incident response plan.
In our non-existent incident response plan, yeah. I'm sure we have a DR plan, right?
Yeah, drop and run. Yeah, I'm sure you're right about that. In this particular case, right?
Now I'm wondering if one of the clients said it was a law firm, our lawyer's not there.
Yeah.
That law firm, right? We're not double dipping.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. Has anybody got a worse backup disaster story? Man, with you guys on the line, I'm almost sure there got to be at least half a dozen. But
usually because the proper backups were broken that were supposed to do the stateful SQL stuff, then stop SQL and make it work. Turns out that wasn't working. We found out when to restore. So we happen to have someone who said, I think I can fix it, and then spent the next hour working SQL magic of reassembling a warehouse of epic size and proportion of all their data into a SQL database that then worked when it was all done. So that was interesting. We didn't think it would work, but yeah, it was. We've definitely recovered a couple, and then we learned the backup tools that we were using were not good at what they did. We had a whole image, just didn't have a proper working SQL database.
Yeah, exactly.
I had a code repository at one point stage in my career that was the software developers were working on establishing a brand new secure code repository to meet a customer's requirement, and they took all the source code for the application, put it in a code repo, and one guy had the master password to the code repo, and he died. And 3 years later, when someone needed the source code, no one realized that no one had. We had everything you could possibly need on a fully redundant, encrypted, backed up platform. That the only way to get it out, even from the vendor, their statement was, "Well, you've got to have that code."
Wow.
Yeah. I've seen backup keys saved on desktop in file called backup-key.txt. That's where they saved it, and that's where it went and died with the server.
All right, MacKenzie, you're on. It's time to allocate some more.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so just go down the list and pick some more that have servers.
Is it getting bigger? Oh, okay. Do I have more?
You can go down the list.
Okay, just spread them thin there.
Well, until our CFO tells us different, then that's what we're going to do.
Oh, okay, cool.
I'm saying risk mitigation says do the healthcare. They will probably sue us the biggest.
The least.
For loss of life if their systems aren't back up.
And one of you is the service lead. You should have like our support lead.
I'm the support lead, right?
Okay. You could, once the servers are restored at a site, you could, in other words, there are 0 servers down at a site, like future resources.
Oh, you could get rid of. Oh, well.
You can start allocating on that line. You can start allocating your admin people who can restore a couple workstations per day. So a little plus sign out to the right by the rook. You can add those to any line.
Restored 6. Well, down 0. Round do. Just adding where there's actual. Oh no, it won't let me.
Yeah. So you clicking the plus sign by your
Yeah. Oh well, that one works.
Oh, you are. I know you've got it going on. I was talking about the service lead.
Yeah, I'm checking the ones that.
Yeah, servers are. All the servers are restored. Yeah.
All the servers are restored. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. That's what you need to do. You can just do a plus sign by the little castle, by the rook. That'll allocate them. Kenzie, you got yours allocated, so that's good. At least they're somewhere. Yeah.
Got it.
There you go. Perfect. Yeah. So that's the part of this. You guys are really fast at picking this up, obviously, right? But the reason that we built this in here to where you have to do resource allocation is because this is really designed. It's not a tactical, technical exercise. It's really a hearts and mind leadership exercise to get them to be able to understand what's involved in dealing with one of these scenarios, right? That's the problem we've had, is get them to be emotionally attached to what's involved in dealing with an incident. And so that's the reason it's engineered this way. Having the people playing it be responsible for allocating resources builds that connectivity with them in the scenario, right? It makes them get engaged, right? Immersed in the process. Yeah, you guys are all allocated though. That's good. And these timers, these relentless timers, are to put pressure on the situation. So,
well, we've all been on that basketball team where we only had 3 men on the court, right? That if we just had a few more, we could absolutely be doing much better.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and you know what? That's your point taken there is that, look, if you haven't really thought this through as someone who has to deal with incidents, you're never going to have enough resources and you're never going to have enough time or enough information at the time that all this goes down, right? So you're going to have to be overcoming some huge problems right off the bat just to try to make any progress. And there is no winning this. It's losing it the least worst way that you can, right? When you get in these situations, you're just trying to recover as quickly and reduce the loss as fast as you can. That's really what it is. You can't keep it from happening. So it's about limiting the damage and speeding the recovery, and everything that we do as cybersecurity professionals, that's what we're trying to do. Limit the damage, speed the recovery.
So there's no way to, you're telling me this is the MSP version of the Star Trek Kobayashi Maru. There's no way to win
100%. 100%. And thank you for that reference that only us old dudes know. I appreciate that 100%. Who and how do we notify for HIPAA data exposure? So this is, again, a situation where if you have clients that are healthcare clients, who
lawyer.
and how do we notify?
Well, a lawyer, yeah, but I don't think we notify.
Right.
I think we validate to the client whether or not exposure existed potentially, and then they confirm it, and then they do the notification.
Yeah, because that's basically there to bait people into that discussion, right? It's like, who's ultimately responsible for reporting HIPAA violations? The healthcare provider, right? That's on their list. And why is the communication process critical? We've talked about that a little bit already, but having all your people on the same page because is really critical. And everything you say during these things matters, right?
Yeah, and having an established out-of-band communication, as you mentioned, email might be down. Some of the traditional systems you use on a day-to-day basis, maybe Slack is down because it was SSO and now you can't SSO in. Having that established ahead of time, like we use Signal Messenger that we've well established. I think a lot of people in cybersecurity use it, but having that out-of-band, we have a way to talk to each other. We already have each other's cell phone numbers. That way we have a way to make sure we communicate.
Yeah,
100%.
And then also spin up like an Teams instance or something on the side that's clean that we can invite them to.
Yeah, sharing out a document so everyone can just collect all that information so timelines can be put together later, who did what when.
Yeah, I mean, that's what most, at least people that we talk to, I mean, this thing is to drag out permutations that some people really don't think about. Because once you get an IR plan, you feel like you got it covered. But all of what happens is the experience that in this room, especially everybody in this room, the experience we had is, hey, you can have that nice IR plan, but it's not going to survive first contact with an incident. There's going to be parts of this that you probably didn't think about. And everything you guys are bringing up are exactly what we try to bring out when we're playing this game with either the enterprise customers or the MSPs. It's like, okay, I know you probably thought about a lot, but did you think about this? Right? And this out-of-band communication thing seems to catch most participants.
Especially for us, to be honest, I mean, with the amount of people that are impacted or other organizations, I wouldn't want anything that could be e-discovery based. I wouldn't want anything in email, nothing. Because we've been in situations where threat actors were not only monitoring our emails, but doing keyword searches looking for specific things. And then you have to do a cloud investigation on top of that. But it's not unheard of the amount of ransomware cases where the operators would go and look for things tagged as cyber insurance. And so they would ask perfectly
100%.
to the amount in which that and
when you look at the Yahoo attack, they were in their Slack watching them. The Twitter attack. The Twitter one was just like they pulled the information out of Slack and then we're still in Slack. And
when we ran this at my MSP, I did the tabletop version of it. We wound up making a dozen different adjustments to an IR plan that we've had and been going through and practicing for 5 years. There were 12 adjustments we had to make to it. And one of them was to not have our insurance policy stored on our servers, to have that somewhere else, to have out-of-band communication. So you're right that all these little edge cases are the things that can come back to bite you.
Having a printed copy of your IR plan.
Yes. We have it. we call it the doomsday binder, right? We got our doomsday binder now. It's got our contact lists and everything else, and our financials. Oh, allocation time. So,
Ooh.
Kenzie, you're up. Service lead, you're up.
All right, let me get my peeps out there. Bam, bam, bam. I feel like I have a really easy job, to be quite honest, though.
Well, right now, honestly, the CEO, which I'm playing the CEO, and the CFO would be trying to figure out, okay, who are we really trying to figure out? What direction are we going to be giving our tech leads so that they can actually allocate those resources in the right place?
Yeah.
So that's really part of the stress of when you're playing this. And it's really interesting when you get MSP CEOs in the seat, because this just terrifies them, right? Because they haven't thought through the idea of having to prioritize. This is battlefield triage, right? You're trying to figure out how you're going to triage the situation.
Well, and you want to know which ones likely have an on-site technical lead already, or someone that's considered, because I imagine a lot of the healthcare ones, since they have 200 people, by golly, some of those have to be some IT people, right? I mean, those are the people we worked closely with, because we needed some network engineer, some IT person. They really knew the real answers of how things worked and where the data.
So Eden's got a great question in the chat. He's asking, are we allocating the right clients? And we've kind of been talking about it, but it's funny because, MacKenzie, you're driving everything I'm doing, because I'm not assigning any restoration folks until you've got servers back up, right? So when you're assigning your resources, my resources come in behind you. And so even if I disagreed with who you're assigning resources to and thought there was a higher priority, I'm reliant on all the work that you're doing to be able to then put restoration work back in.
Yeah. And I figured if I have them, use them all, so I'm putting them everywhere.
Yeah. Well, but in reality, in the real situation, this is where the leadership has to give guidance, right? They should be giving you guidance, say, hey, I want to go after critical infrastructure first, or hey, I want this guy that I've known for 17 years. I want him to come up first, and then the CFO is going to be saying, yeah, but we need to recover, the most monthly recurring, or we need to, or the strategy of, okay, well, you know what, we're not going to get them all up, but let's at least get all their servers up and try to get at least some of their workstations up. That's another
and I
strategy.
wish I could double down on tech leads, because I would be able to push more into one area than the other temporarily.
Well, MacKenzie, you have that ability. Once all the servers are restored, you can actually drop your tech leads someplace. Yeah, once all the servers are restored, then you can drop tech leads on that line, and it will increase the number of workstations that are getting repaired. So you're balancing between, okay, well, I'd rather get servers up, for this customer, but or I can get 4 workstations up with the same tech lead at somebody that I feel like got a priority.
Okay.
So that's exactly right. Yeah, here we go. I can't wait to hear the answers from you guys on this, because this is a killer question for this audience, for you guys that are playing. Under what circumstances would you pay a ransom?
Are we responsible for paying the ransom, though? This is where I should have poured me some whiskey, because I feel like individually, each organization's going to have a different plan or a different general counsel, and all of the recommendations are never to pay the ransom. And we don't really know until the investigation's finished, which is why we'd never recommend paying the ransom, because each organization, you don't know how far the threat actor was in their environment to potentially get reinfected outside of the MSP. So even if we recovered and fixed all of our shit, hypothetically, they could have dropped persistence mechanisms inside the other organizations, and then they could get reinfected and have, the double extortion thing, which was at the beginning. So I know that's probably not an answer, but I guess I'm confused of who really pays the ransom in this case, or makes that decision.
Insurance sometimes, because people with enough money to make it happen.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone says, and all of us will say, I'm not paying the ransom under no circumstances. Then the reality of it is, you have clients where the option is ransom, pay the ransom, give the bad people the money that makes them operate at a harder rate next time. But we have a client that their other option is going out of business. They will write a check.
Life and limb is always a potential reason to have to pay a ransom. If the risk is too high, if there are medical procedures that aren't being done, if there are medical records that aren't available and are critical, there are times we've all seen those organizations that said we're a hospital and we're just going to have to, even though we know this is bad and don't do it.
We just seen that with United Health. They paid the ransom.
I mean, one of the problems would be with paying the ransom is in many cases the decryptor key is actually broken. You just get
or it doesn't work fully, especially the latest extortion rounds. Or back to United Health, because it's recent in the news here. The affiliate they gave the money to decided not to give it to the other operators, so then they got double ransomed, and so it was ineffective to give the people the money. No honor among thieves.
Now, I can tell you from experience in the field with actually dealing with our customers who we were not their security provider, but they got ransomware and asked for help. If they don't have a good backup and they have no way to recover, there are times when they just didn't have the choice. The other instance I've seen it happen, and it happened twice out of about a dozen. They were so terrified of that information getting out, and then part of paying the ransom was, and we could all say this with a grain of salt, right? But when the ransomware guys say, "Look, you pay us, we will not disclose this information, out on the web," that was enough. That was enough of a motivation for them to pay the ransom, to be honest with you. And we all know that the odds of it not actually making it on the web are zero for the most part. At some point, it's going to make it out there, but they may put it in a time capsule for a few years before they release it, but it's going to make it out there.
Yeah.
But it was enough. You got to think about the motivation of the individuals who are staring down the barrel of that rifle. And for them, it was enough of a motivator to do it. So I'm with all of you. You shouldn't pay it. You should be in a position where you don't have to pay it by having good defenses and good restoration capability. But there are definitely circumstances where it does happen, right? So 100%.
Yeah. Well, I love all these conversations are kind of mute because we don't have a documented incident response plan, right? But setting that aside, the decision that we're having to make because we don't have that incident response plan of which customers to restore first, which are the most critical, based on our SLAs or our contracts with them or the criticality of the customer. That's something that I wouldn't even want that decision to be made at the time of an event, even if we had the documented incident response plan. Shouldn't ever be do this assessment for the customers. That criticality should be something that not only are we evaluating at time of customer onboard, but on a regular basis where we're going through and looking at the entire population of our customers and saying, okay, do we have the right mix of available resources to all of the customers for this type of incident? And if not, who gets priority? Because it will happen. And when it does, we don't want MacKenzie going, I've only got 8 for 24, right? Or if she does, she shouldn't have to go, oh my God, which 8 do I click? It should be, it's already laid out. This is the most critical, this who paid more, whatever the SLA is, but this is the math already.
Yeah, 100%. You should have that planned out and mapped out by being aware. Allocation phase. So.
Okay, so technically the servers are restored, so I can double down, and some are like, well, I mean,
if you scroll down, by the way, that's a scrolling area, right? So if you scroll down, there's still some lines down there. So.
You're right. Sorry.
You said that last round. I'm going, oh,
there's more.
Sure. Yeah, but there's more.
I feel like first we need to put out some job recs and hire some more technicians ASAP.
Well, I think it's reasonable too to say have a plan to hire like a Field Nation or some type of technical resource to help you with this temporary surge.
Right. Well, and someone had mentioned in this chat, Dagley, you had mentioned we made the wrong decisions by prioritizing resources.
Yeah, Dagley's played the game before, so he's trying. Dagley's trying to save you. That's what he's trying to do. Bless his heart. So that's what he means.
So some people, or some of these are getting restoration. Oh, well, duh, because I didn't restore. So let me maybe give some of the other healthcare people some restoration.
You only got a minute 40 to get them out. So yeah.
Ah, shit. Okay. Hold on. Okay. Here we go. Let me just avoid all the lawyers.
They can be last. They can't sue me if they can't get to their server. I didn't see this brought up, but one of the big problems you run into when you're doing a mass restore is bandwidth.
Yeah.
Never enough of it.
Oh, that's true. Right. Yes. If you hadn't figured that out, like, no, you're 100% right on that front.
Yeah.
If you haven't done the math.
I think it'd be based on user too versus level of restoration or type of industry, because restoration would take longer with more users. I mean, okay. No, I don't want to give it to you. Let me take that away. I'm sorry. You're not more important. Let's focus on critical infrastructure. Oh, that's a big one. Let's do that. That'll be simple. Okay. Someone else can go.
Good job.
I'm so sorry to those poor organizations that I didn't scroll down to. Whoops.
Yeah, I hated to tell you because you were in such a good place in your head when I mentioned that.
Yeah.
I said,
yeah. Well, Stephen, I'd say that I'm the scapegoat here soon, so someone's got to get fired at the end of the day.
We're 6 days in, and a national healthcare site with 125 locations has not been touched.
Oh shit! Yeah.
Yeah, the realities start setting in. I always love right around day 7, day 8. You know, the mathematics start settling in, and it gets to that oh shit pretty quick.
Yeah,
it does.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Do you have defined SLAs? In our case, we have published SLAs.
I think it's clear this organization does not.
Yeah,
well, believe it or not, we do. We do in our configuration data up there. It says we do have SLAs, which is even more horrendous when you consider we don't have an incident response plan, right? But
yeah,
are the SLAs just internal or external? So this is a dialogue that we have with the players. You know, when we have a bunch of MSPs in the room, and we say, okay, does our MSA obligate us to certain SLAs, including response and resolve times? And then how can you define resolution time? How can defined resolution times be problematic? So those are discussion points we have. So service level agreements. You guys have any opinion on how those work or how they should work?
I mean, they go out the door in an incident response like this at this scale.
Oh, that's true.
They're unachievable. You're going to violate all of them. Don't try to make one person happy. Just pick the priorities of the companies. Pick the companies that maybe have the most social impact, like healthcare and things like that. That's probably really important. Like MacKenzie said, lawyers can wait.
You would hope that you work with the organizations. We don't have an incident. We obviously this wouldn't happen. But even outside of those SLAs, they do go out the door, even though they're contractual, so that would still hurt. But like mean time to resolve is going to be different for every organization. So if you could at least identify what that recovery objective is for each one, then you could hypothetically meet your SLAs for some and then try to prioritize more resources to the ones where that mean time recovery objective would be higher or more difficult. But
yeah, what this set of questions is really
scrolled down, so I'm sorry. Yeah. Already caught that.
So what this set of questions is dragging out is, look, if you're going to have SLAs, you need to consider the fact that if you have extenuating circumstances, you need to put some language in there to be able to account for that, right? If you've never really considered that to be an issue, well, that's what this exercise is teaching you, is that, hey, I don't care whether you thought about it or not. If it's a third-party attack, which, by the way, the incident we're dealing with right now was a compromise of a third party. They got in through an RMM, right? Not that RMMs get compromised, in our recent history, right? But if in a situation where the actual provider gets compromised, is it really your fault if the RMM gets compromised because of how it's constructed or how it works on the backside? Now, it's one thing if you are at fault because you just left the passwords on somebody's table or emailed them out accidentally or whatever. But in the case of a third-party attack, not many people have. In the past, we wouldn't put that in our language. It's in our language now. In my MSP's language, we actually have language about third-party responsibility, from our vendors, right? Because, just because we chose that tool and we're using it doesn't mean that we're really responsible for it going south because they got compromised.
Bob, you've used two great different phrases though: at fault and responsible. They're not necessarily the same thing legally.
That's correct.
You may not be at fault for the RMM, but because of the contract, it may be our responsibility. I mean, it is our responsibility to recover and resolve, and hopefully that's covered in the MSA.
Yeah. Well, and I can tell you, your vendor agreements. This is something that I don't know if you guys know Eric Till, but he's kind of in our ecosystem and talks about contracting. But your vendor agreements are important for that very reason, right? So because all the regulations are swinging toward making those vendors more responsible for managing the security of their product, right?
Shared responsibility matrix. Yes. Understand where the responsibility lands with each of the vendors. What's you, what's them. This is huge.
Yeah, and it's going to be more. I mean, as we go in the near future, all of this is going to even be more of a discussion, right? Because again,
do we know how the RMM was compromised?
Yeah, you know what? It does not say in here. I'm choosing just because I want the one little grain of sunshine to be that they got compromised. But you're right; it doesn't actually say in this scenario whether it was something that we did or something.
It changes your mood.
We already got the hell beat out of us. Right? I'm just trying to, I don't want MacKenzie to actually crack the whiskey bottle.
We're gonna hire Matt Lee now.
If it's our PR rep is now in here.
Well, if it's the scenario I created, we do know how it was compromised. It was us. Our
now it's us.
Calls that. So when you go back to Drew's segmentation of accountability versus responsibility, and those two both wore on the same head, unfortunately for us in our scenario. So.
There you go.
All right. Well, now I'm going to start scrolling appropriately and start.
So I had the ability to assign all of the little rooks to National Healthcare, and just for grins and giggles, I did that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. You can do resource stacking, so you can actually decide you're going to hard court press on one or two clients.
Our dealership, they can last.
Yeah.
So Future Transport has fired us. Is that what that's what's going on there?
Oh yeah, you got an inject. You're right.
What do you-
Right. Since you at the very top, right under the timer, you'll see that you got an inject. Since you have given them no help and they have been down for for days, Future Transport has fired you. It just canned you.
Well, cool. That gives me more tech leads. So maybe I should focus on some of the other transports I've been ignoring.
And make sure they do better than those suckers that left us in our care.
Yeah.
I'm going to do a smear campaign.
Oh, my gosh.
Wait.
That's a problem for revenue recognition next quarter, not the support team today, right?
Healthcare.
There we go.
Down.
Oh, by the way, National Healthcare is a plastic surgery facility. I don't know if you guys knew that. I'm just teasing.
I'm going to take away a couple of them.
Andy Laren, while we're listening to this, Andy Laren in the chat says, I hope we're taking care of our people, because even though we're making a little levity of this right now, like if you imagine yourself in this scenario, it's chaos. I mean, it is chaos. Everybody's down. Everybody's angry. I mean, how many of you have given out your cell phone number when you were meeting somebody on a Saturday to put in a firewall? Or, they have all that contact information. They're reaching out to you under this level of chaos that you just haven't seen before. So you do have to take care of them. Day 7, to Andy's point, will be completely exhausted. They've already been called horrible things, right? When you're the person that's the reason for their demise, they're like, I hate you, right? I wish we had never met you. In our case, they had been ransomed 3 times by the same MSP. Same MSP had been compromised. Voldemort had been compromised 3 times. And you want to know about people looking at you and going, I wish I'd never met you? That's yeah. So you have to imagine your people are extremely exhausted. I'll get off my pulpit before I break my neck here.
Hey, I was going to say, because I know that, and Wes, you can weigh in on this, but I know that we were going to kind of run it for an hour or so. But what I'm saying is that until you guys want to stop, we'll run this thing.
Yeah, that's how to go.
So,
if anyone needs to go, we understand.
I mean, I'm having too much fun. So, and we almost got MacKenzie to drinking. So I think if we just stick to this a little while longer,
I know.
we'll actually get her in the bottle.
I'll do that, but we'll see. We'll see if someone else fires us. Maybe I'll go take it.
All right, Matt, you want to do it? Or you want me to do it? Who's dealt with the situation where most of our techs are swamped? Somebody was just talking about, health of your technicians, right, and keeping an eye on them, right? So,
well, health of your technicians. and then the impossible mission. Like at some point you don't have enough technicians. I mean, we're day 7 and we've got hands moving. And if you remember the way this was set up, for some reason you have to wipe every machine, right? So this is a very laborious process. Maybe it's an emotet or something that had that level of persistence that was a wipe and reload. So, you know, you're figuring out that you're overloaded. You've got tickets coming in. And then guess what? Is anybody back up? Well, if they're back up, they're back to day-to-day crap. They're having problems, and then they're having problems going, is this because of the restore, or is this problems because of something I'm just dealing with today? And so you're getting to that state. One of the things that came up in earlier playing today when it's talking about how do you deal with the tickets and all is it really goes back to communications too. I think the other side of this, and what I've heard is the best suggestion is having a trust page that's up or some kind of page that's up that's saying, hey, we're dealing with this right now. We're in this phase, and it's constantly updated, and sharing that information about where we are. We're aware that ticket prioritization is still an issue. We are first prioritizing getting machines up in this like whatever it may be. But the point is, when you get to that state, you're having to start making some Sophie's choices. Anybody else thoughts on that, or how you deal with being overwhelmed and no ability to deal operationally with what's in front of you?
I don't know. I feel like we need to consider like a NATO-like creation in the MSP community. You know what I mean? Where like
I know where you're going. Yeah.
Where like some of us are like, hey, we'll provide free containment MDR services, and then some of us will be like, hey, we'll yeet over 20 engineers.
Yeah.
Or you know, something like that. I feel like that would be
so. That's useful. What we did, Mac. Like we at our former role, we actually went out and said, oh my God, what if we could say to this other MSP we're friendly with, maybe same peer group, maybe same capabilities, can I have 20% of your workforce for this much time for 2 weeks, and I'll pay you this number? There's 2 reasons for that. Number one, when we submitted our claim, any of our overtime wasn't considered as allowed to be paid to those people. But if I hired somebody else, like another MSP, and they let me pay on certain very favorable terms, I can deal with cash flow. I can also probably be reimbursed as third-party payments, potentially, depending on your insurance policy. Like, Mac, you're nailing it. And then I don't want to miss Andy's comment of MSP 911. Right?
That's what I was going to say right there.
Oh, that's a thing.
That's a real thing. Yeah, absolutely. Robert Chiaffi. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm still a little new in some ways.
No, you talked some other idiot into being the co-chair of that organization. His name's Matt Lee. Jason Slagle's in it. Yeah, this is it right down there. Thank you so much.
There you go. Right, absolutely. Yeah, I was going to bring that up when she got through. There is actually something similar to what she was referring to.
What about when, you know, to your point, what that does for you is give you operational flexibility. Go back to Robert Chiaffi's discussion of having everything up on a sticky notes on board. And he had different sticky notes for the guy from this company and the gal from that. Drew's going to be doing these 19 machines. You know, Tom's going to be handling these servers and stuff, and he'll make videos about it the whole time, which is going to be pretty baller. But ultimately, like that manual manipulation of resources, they now have more resources, right, to that point. Yeah. But what about if your ticket system's down? What tickets are you responding to? In our case, the PSA and RMM were both in the same lateralization path for Company Voldemort, which this is modeled after. I just give up. But what do you do? How do you deal with it now?
Old school, man. Emails. Everything goes to help@voldemort.com. We send it right to the Bitbucket, but, you know, it goes somewhere.
One giant group chat.
Yeah.
I got to be honest, I'm really excited about what I'm hearing with the MSP partnerships, and I know that Empath, that's a lot of the spirit that's been involved here, is that the collaboration and working together and growth. Because in the manufacturing and durable goods space that I've worked in for most of my career, when one of my industry competitors has a cyber incident and is down for 2 weeks and can't manufacture and sell, I'm not giving them resources to help. I'm stealing all the time, right? That is
twice the price, right? Like
absolutely.
He drags up a lawn chair and marshmallows and watches the flames lick the ceiling. Yeah, I know.
And my marketing department, you can bet, is doubling down on Facebook ads and TikTok ads. We'll deliver tomorrow, right? Absolutely.
Yeah. One thing that's really important is dig the well before you're thirsty. Make all these connections, make all these friends. Go to any type of MSP meetups. interact, engage with people, because then when you reach out for those resources, you already at least have some established, you know who to ask for, things like that. Those are really important key things to being a very social member of the MSP community or whatever community you're in. Because Drew's right. I mean, in the competitive manufacturing space, I can't imagine that there's shared resources. But for the most part, we realize as MSPs, the majority of the people I meet in the MSP space, with limited exception for people who are not very enlightened, most of them don't look at it as a competitor, are always willing to help. They're willing to throw some resources towards you, discuss ideas. How could this be done better? And I imagine I see quite a few people on here, and I bet anyone who's showed up to this is also among those people that are of that same ilk that want to help.
I'd say something to that's not at the risk of sounding and showing off my PTSD, but I think there is a common element, and it's much like a nation attacked, right? When a nation's attacked, you see pulling together of disparate parties and roles.
Someone's always running towards the fire.
Yeah. And so I feel like we're in this situation where we are having to collectively as an industry deal with more than we can bear and more than we should in the nature of our technology around this. And I think that's why, Drew, to your point, this isn't that way. It's just nature of, we're all going to die if we don't deal with this. I'd love to help Drew out if he's dealing with it. And that is quite unique to what we're dealing with right now. And it's interesting. So I
think it's clear that there's way more enemies than there are soldiers right now, right? I mean, we just clearly understand.
Fair. Yeah, it's fair. Or at least
that's the situation that's the situation we're in now. We are way overgunned on this. So if we don't stick to right, Benjamin Franklin, if we don't stick together, we'll hang separately. So yeah.
Man, I didn't expect that quote today. It's fantastic. Speaking of sticking together and hanging at the same time, we're about to finish pushing our pieces out here, I suppose.
Well,
are we gonna get better than the zeros? Right. We ran this today and we got all zeros, Bob. I'm blown away by this. This was the first ever that I've seen of all zeros, and it was
we actually played this earlier for those of you on this one. We played this with a group of 25 or so. 25 or 30. Yeah. And so we had 3 different rooms going, and they have variations on this scenario or this particular configuration in each one of the rooms. But after all of that and going through it for 2 hours, they scored 0 out of 10, right? So that's what Matt's referring to.
Yeah, it's not normal. And you guys, we're gonna do better here.
Yeah, here's so to your point, you guys were talking about burnout and things. So this is where we start talking about this. What are the key signs that you can identify burnout in your personnel? How do you manage technical load, and how do you handle mental health in high stress situations, and what's the best practice for care for your technicians in a high stress situation? And Matt, I'm gonna jump on what you said, right? One of the things I learned from doing these exercises and going to these conferences is that, and having gone through dealing with incidents myself, is that we changed our IR plan. This is one of the things we changed in our IR plan, is that I'm going to conserve my internal people as much as possible and let external people or third-party people come in and field as much as possible. And the reasons being is I'm trying to conserve the sanity and the mental health of my group, because once you get these people restored, you need to be able to go back and build back trust as quick as you can. If you expend all of your people's mental resources just trying to get past it, then you're not going to have anybody that can actually start picking up that ball again and start building trust. And for the second reason is, and Matt nailed it, is that insurance is not going to reimburse you for your internal time, but they will reimburse you for third-party assets.
Might not. I'll say might not, depending on the scenario. But yeah.
Well, it's also worth noting that after all these restores, the ticket load still doesn't go away because restore is perfect.
Right. 100%.
And then every problem they have is related to that. The customer will bring back
100%.
Incident last year.
Yeah. Maybe it's still a threat. And that literally happened, Tom. I don't know if you're just reading my notebook over here, but that's literally what happened. Everything would come back to the incident. Like, hey, this wasn't restored from this. And you go back and prove at the end of the day, no, this absolutely was the same way it was. And yeah, it's a psychosis.
We have people who do like the mouse moved. It must be because of that. It can't be because there's a jitter in the mouse. The mouse moved. It must be I'm under attack again. They get their own form of it, and then they open tickets
PTSD themselves from that regard. Yeah.
To your point, what I did when we did the SolarWinds incident, we have a SOC, right? And our SOC determined that we weren't really impacted by it. We had all the forensic evidence to show that, we had luckily we did not do auto updates on SolarWinds. We always hand updated everything. So we were not impacted by the revision that came out that had that in there. But what I did is, because I knew exactly this was going to happen, like you're talking about, is that everybody was going to be blaming me when their coffee pot didn't work in their building. So I kicked our IR plan off. We brought our incident coach online. We got a third-party forensic company come validate all of the forensics in the data and make a determination, and then give that to our incident coaches so they could write a legal, description saying, yes, this organization was not impacted by the SolarWinds things, and it's backed up by a third-party validation.
Right.
And I sent that to every one of our customers, because I knew exactly what you were talking about. Is we were going to get, if I did not do that and draw that line in the sand, we were going to get blamed for everything for the next 10 years. So I 100% agree with you on that.
All right, so MacKenzie, this is your world. What's the best practice for taking care of people in high stress situations? Like, you've literally lived in between some of the more high stress situations for some of these incidents. Like,
you get brand deals for Bang Energy. That helps.
Get a sponsorship.
We should ask, what do we need to do for MacKenzie, because she's under a lot of stress right now.
Yeah. As long as I don't scroll, apparently. Ignorance is bliss. I don't know why they fired us.
You have that many clients?
Wait, this many more below?
I think this is hard, and my team did go through SolarGate, and we went through the Exchange 0 days, and we were given the ability to expense food for the next few weeks. They were like $75 a day if you're actively working on a case. Any of those, which was a lot. And so everyone started going to the grocery store. So after like 3 weeks, they were like, you need to go to a restaurant and spend $75, because people are just buying groceries and doing that. It's difficult to do that, because it's certainly burnout, and you give people breaks. You don't want to take away their time off. And so it does come down to allocation of time and trying to prioritize, and then divvying it up. Also, what we dealt with a lot is a lot of customers, or clients in this case, they didn't like it when we would take people away, even though we would need to give breaks to our people. They didn't like it. And I can tell you, getting on the phone, by the time it usually reached our team, I remember one of the last cases I worked, I got, video straight into a conference room, and they were in India, and there was probably like 40 people around a table, and they were all just engineers and technicians and some management, and they were exhausted. They had been up for at least 20 hours straight, everyone on call, and nothing I'd say mattered. And they certainly didn't like it when I was like, all right, now I'm going to send over the paperwork of the invoice, because we can't do anything until you sign it. And so, they were, maybe that's the way to get people to sign for things, is make sure they're burnt out and they're more likely to just give you the money. But yeah, that's a tough question, because it's knowing your people is the first thing, knowing what their skill sets are, because some people can handle it and some people can't.
And have successfully distracted us from deploying resources. Okay.
I still have one hospital that is really not doing.
I think Drew started to say something. Was that Drew?
Yeah, one of the critical things for me in like response and recovery, for just with the limited teams that I have that are highly technical resources, but when we're dealing, like, for instance, with Log4Shell, Log4j, right? That was just a nightmare of detection, response, and recovery for like 48 hours, even at that scale for us. And the big thing for me was compartmentalization and insulation of those teams, because we talked early on about like engineers giving out their personal cell phone numbers to customers, right? Well, what I was experiencing is that somebody in sales or somebody in marketing or somebody in manufacturing, everybody knew somebody, and they kept pinging and pestering and, hey man, what's going on? Can you give me an update? What more can I hear? And that constant barrage, even if it's not really, a heavy uplift, it's taking the focus. So the ability to just stand in the way, especially once we're in the technical work, I'm more of the process. I'm more of the documented incident response plan. The key to the keyboard. I'm going to get a fetching coffee at this point to make sure that I'm insulating, so that so that we're not getting those folks aren't getting just that pestered and belabored. They can do their work and do it timely.
Yeah, it's like protecting the technicians. And Bob, you and I had a bit of a back and forth on this, right? Because you said, Matt, I'm just going to outsource even the hands on the keyboards for a lot of this restoration. I think that was you. And when you start thinking about that impact is like, you're saying, I'm going to tell my people to back off and we're going to pay other people to help out and do things. And so you're starting to say, like, it really is that protecting of those people trying to get the technical resources done. And also a combination of like, maybe even protecting your people so that they're working on normal tickets as this goes to some extent, right? That was kind of one of your arguments, right?
Oh, yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, the bottom line was, and I know some people might say, well, man, they may not like that. I can tell you my team appreciate it because they've been through enough of these to know how tough it really is and to have any support. And for us to even consider, hey, we want to, for us to even consider, being able to help them out was a big thing. So. Yeah.
This inject, I got to keep us back on track because that's the point of this game is to keep us a little chaotic. So the question here is, what are the things you have to consider in an MSA and a statement of work with your managed service agreement? Like here we're talking about now, we have challenges where if we've had SLAs before, we're definitely not meeting them. We have challenges of, have we even defined stuff about maybe an incident in our MSA? Like what happens in an incident? Who's responsible for what? What are the things that are in our SRM? Tom, you talked about this earlier, shared responsibility matrix and this burgeoning conversation around what am I even responsible for under what conditions? So what are those things? Let's talk about MSAs, y'all. Let's go.
I mean, MSAs certainly would help with distinguishing liability from the get-go as far as what types of services you have agreed upon, what level of support, what type of hours, any of those objectives from a time frame of how fast you have to act, which I know is more in like the service level agreement, but
sure.
I've seen
those. It's codified there, right? To your point, it's codified in that contract.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
And there might be some carve outs for special circumstances and things like that that
right.
can be outlined. One of the things that we deal with less here in the Midwest, but certainly is when you go further south, like Florida, you have incidents that are weather related where you can't match your service agreements. This is going to have to be carved out in there because hurricane, whatever's coming, and I'm not going to be on site.
Yeah.
We have that in Louisiana. That's actually part of our MSA in Louisiana. We have force majeure, and we explain that really clearly about what they can expect and what they can't expect. You're exactly right.
From the customer side, I've seen things in MSAs where we said that if they were responsible for any sort of security incident or breach, and it was them, that we were at any point able to get out of our contract, get out of any contract.
Or bill for the labor, or some of the things we're talking about here that come up in these plays. And Bob, what's great about doing this now 3 times is I get to hear some common thematic aspects, but also some common wisdom. And a lot of it that have come of this is that MSPs are starting to define, hey, if I'm bringing in an incident, we talked about this before of, one of the first things I wanted to do is it me or is it you? If it's me, it may be my insurance, my panel, my engagement, those aspects. If it's you, it may be you, your panel. But when it is them and not me, and there is some time that has to be done, right? That insurance is going to bring in Spear Tip or someone that's going to do this investigative work, but I'm going to be the hands. I'm going to run around and do all the collections of evidence. Am I billing for that? Is that part of my normal MSA? Am I actually doing this work for free, or is it supposed to be expected? And so some of the things that came out of it is, Tom, it's close to an MSP in this conversation as can be, and anybody else want to speak up? Like, what does that sound like? Is that something that needs to be defined? Is how I'm going to bill you? And MacKenzie, yours was we could cancel the contract, but it could be I might bill you for my hours if it turns out it's not our fault and we're dealing with it. What are y'all's thoughts on that? Just to spike this conversation.
I hate MSA.
You can even say, Matt, you're an idiot. The intention of this is to start that part.
I think I sold my MSP, so I don't have to deal with MSAs anymore.
So as a customer, I also hate MSAs because on my side, the amount of times I've worked with a vendor who's provided, we've worked on a master service agreement and the SLAs therein, and they've given me SLAs that I know they're not actionable. I know you're telling me. You're giving me time to recover. You're giving me time to detect and full restoration that I don't think that you're actually able to hit. And that's the challenge Yeah, is that actually for business as usual, or is this for financial recovery after the fact? Right. That's
right.
Ideally, I don't want a breach of SLA. I don't want money coming back to me because you couldn't alter the contract. I want an SLA that you can demonstrate you can meet.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't matter what's the damn thing if they can't do it. You're exactly right.
And it's important too to have like some of the arbitration where will be arbitrated as an MSP who crosses states. We'll see in WR as we cross quite a few states because I gave Jason all my cross-state clients. So there's a lot of arbitration clauses.
I'm catching a theme here, Tom.
Yes,
I'm catching a theme. I don't know if you're putting it down.
Yeah, we actually define what we're responsible for in our MSA as it relates to incidents.
Well, and I think that's the other piece. And Drew said this when I first came on, which was the RACI matrix, really, when you think about it, right? Like, what am I responsible for? What am I accountable for? What am I consulted about? What am I informed about in both lenses? And I think we have a lot of gap in that. And there's still a lot of gap around IR. There's a lot of gap around a lot of these things that come into when you're getting into that conversation, like shared responsibility and all the nuances of what side's where, right? Like patching is the simplest one to explain it in, where patching, you say, okay, is it my responsibility or the client's responsibility to patch? Well, it's both. You have to leave your machine on and like actually be available to patch and not let little Johnny come in screaming every time he doesn't like the fact that it's updating, right? And I have to actually patch, and then you have to make the payment so that I can patch. You got to pay that Cisco SmartNet update if I need to update that Cisco switch, right? Like you're getting into really defining, and Drew said it, I mean, perfectly well in the early point of having the understanding of what's on which side. Am I responsible? Am I accountable? What are these things that we can actually enforce these even? Anyways, side tangent.
I keep going to that trucking one I'm about to add. I'm like, oh, fired. Okay, cool. I can
Thank God.
Well, I
here we are.
Healthcare companies that I didn't know we had as customers, and that's where I'm going back to the fact that this criticality needed to have been done ahead of time, right? Because I covered 3 hospitals and went, I got them, and then found 2 more. I'm like, I don't even know who our customers are.
Hey, look at Change Healthcare in that
resources also to oil and gas, because like I don't want gas prices to go up, so I feel like I'm giving them a little bit.
not the critical infrastructure argument, but the gas price argument. I just want to let that sink in.
I mean, no, it's really personal
with Colonial Pipeline. I definitely
gas and trash bags, man. I've got my Ziploc containers ready for my gasoline.
That's more of a personal impact strategy.
That's a personal impact. I've never
Government could be down. They're always down.
Yeah.
They barely function when they're on.
Yeah, exactly. I've given them a little bit.
The other thing that hasn't been talked about too is how many times do you start out with one company that then maybe spins something off or does something, and then pretty quickly they're 30% of your revenue, or you have this high density in healthcare, to Drew's point, or right, you just kind of walk into this accident. And I think that's often overlooked. And in our case, we had one client that was materially representing 30-40% of the revenue of this acquisition of Voldemort, right? And they fired us, right? Like it was all gone right there in one decision, even though they weren't all the same owner or the same everything. They were correlated and linked, right? In tacit links in that regard. So anyways.
I would like to
MSP, that's hard to avoid.
CFO, I would like to warn the CFO we may lose integrated motors. I have given them I was like, I only had like 3 servers and 24 people. Like,
I was gonna say, I love that a car dealership has had absolutely no activity whatsoever, and in all fairness, they don't know. They may be out on a lot trying to sell Mazdas and have no idea anything's happened.
They're like, I can still get to my video stuff that I'm going to on meancat.com.
All right, this discussion items this time is who's ever assisted another MSP?
Oh, that's good. How many of you have helped somebody during an incident and actually been there to help?
I mean, I have, but not in a way that questions asking.
The interesting part is having someone who, when they called us, one of our first questions was, do you have cybersecurity insurance? They put us on hold, and the IT person said no. And the reason they called was literally I watched Tom's videos. That's how the conversation started. We got hit. Now what? And it was painful working with someone like that. The scale and scope of the company was pretty big too. How they got that big with this many issues was a different mystery. But it's really hard because like you walk through some of these same scenarios like we walked through. It was hit dead end. Like first cybersecurity insurance. Well, no. All right. Do you have backups? Well, kind of. And then you start walking through that and you realize they had the same password for the backup servers as that. So everything was like this roadblock of dead ends that they're just hoping I have the good news. And I'm like, I really wish I could tell you I have the magic secret word that you type in a computer and the magic comes back. But I'm going to refer you over to this incident response company because we're going to start doing on-site cleanup for you. There's no fixing some of this. It's terrible. I mean, I don't want to tell people they have the worst day of their lives. There's no joy you take in that at all. And it sucks because you're doing everything you can to help. We got some stuff restored from. We dedicated some resources on a Saturday and spent like 6 or 7 hours on a Saturday night working with them to try to get them to some status of at least knowing what was going on. It's terrible. It sucks. You share some of that pain. No joy in that.
Right? Like you're signing up to share some of their pain in that regard. Mm-hmm. Jason Slagle and I are part of the incident response or emergency response team from CompTIA, and we're also both first responders. We're taking those calls and being there, just be as a coach and really guide. We're not doing anything tactical, technical. We're really just making sure you're feeding them, making sure you're going to insurance, following the guidelines, helping give resources and connect with people that can help. And so even in that, most of the assistance is the basic stuff, Tom. It's like, have you talked to an insurance company? That there's no plan. In fact, I haven't had a person come through the incident response team stuff that has been ready for it. They haven't had an incident response plan. Drew, you talk about, executing yours. They're still flying by the seat of their pants when they come in. And I'm having to give basic advice to a lot of these things. And I'm not trying to demonetize or be pejorative in any way. I'm just saying, if you're out there right now in the 40 or so people still watching this, I'd ask yourself, like, are you ready to deal with that? Have you planned it? Do you have an incident response plan? Do you know who you're communicating with? Have you even made a bad plan that's going to suck? And so, I've assisted, but it's mostly been just getting people guided to the right resources, like Tom said.
Yeah.
I will say that when you mentioned racy matrices, specifically, that was like the one thing we would recommend in incident response plans to be the most updated part, like regularly monitored and updated portion of the plan, because you can move so much faster on delegation and who to call to allocate resources. So much faster if you already have it laid out, and then you won't forget if you've covered anything also. I think that's like the most important part. Like the rest of your incident response plan, like if parts of it haven't been tested or getting all dusty over the years, that's fine. But that, like you said, like the one dude that died, Drew, the one dude that died, that's the key. Like that's what you want to avoid.
Yeah. I now have a new policy that you can't give a single password to anyone who could, may, or possibly will die. So.
Hello, Overlord and AI. Please take all of my passwords.
We did have an incident where the IT guy unfortunately had died in a motorcycle accident, and they called us. They were panicked because they couldn't get to anything. But it turned out the dude had the dumbest passwords. I guess most of them. It took half an hour.
You have to poke at him. You just guessed at him yourself. That's great.
The number of things that were still admin and things just saved. He saved them. He had all the stuff to save in his browser passwords. I was like logged in. They're like, "How'd you fix that?" I'm like, "He saves it in the browser." And I seen the password he had saved. I'm like, "Maybe he uses that everywhere," and he did. I was like,
wow.
They weren't under.
I don't know whether to cry or laugh at that, Tom. I'm not sure I'm following that statement, if I'm honest.
It's funny when the really piss poor security practices end up also saving us.
Oh, Jesus. Don't say that out loud again, please.
Happens off the time. So
the interact from before that I thought was great at the end, we didn't really get to it, was talking about a mutual assistance agreement, right? Because that's part of what you guys have been alluding to along the way. And on the private sector, while we're members of a lot of ISACs, like retail and hospitality ISAC, FS ISAC, and others, we share information and we proactively work together, and we even share in the event of a large scale crisis. But actually having a mutual assistance agreement where like resources from another private entity would work with my organization through federated access to restore, that for me is a litigation nightmare. And so I think it's amazing that in the MSP world, it's something that could even be a possibility, because I'm thinking about the fact that there's no chance that I've got counsel that would allow that.
Yeah, and it was actually tough. I'll be honest with you, Drew, when we were trying to, I'm sorry, Tom, if you want to go first.
Well, I was going to say, I want to bring up again the legal side of it, because MSPs end up with, and it's crazy the amount of information we have access to that I don't think companies have the strong realization of it. It blows my mind what we technically can access, and the fact that we are signing NDAs or whatever, but it's just kind of a strange thing based on the places we work and the companies we operate with, how little they have asked of us. And we work with some really, if you think government stuff is bad, you've never clearly worked with any of the Hollywood production movies. They really try to keep those are some scary people in terms of the laws they have on it that they put the clients under. But we service a lot of people in the movie industry doing storage servers. I mean, I know what superhero movies are coming out and when.
Well, we're the interstitium, right? Like, we are the unthought of interconnective aspect of this. And Drew, back to this, like having cooperative agreements and having those in place and being able to even do it. It took us a year to get the agreement in place and the NDA in place to allow Jason and myself and Robert Chaffee and the MSP 911 volunteers to have legal protections to even try to help another MSP, even to try to protect ourselves from those resources. And you're not wrong. I don't know that stands and that it's all that possible. But to your point that Tom made, we're in this weird place where what the world is waking up to is how much access we have. When it came to Trustmark, we were trying to determine, like, how much should an MSP's maturity be from a security? Like, should they be 1, 2, or 3? Should they be? And the answer is they've got to be more than their clients, because they are the summation of all of their clients' risk. Right. Because they do have access to that new movie coming out on that storage server. Because they do have access to be the admin of everything, even when your technician or person at that company wouldn't have that access. We have more access than your highest access people at your company. And you wonder why we are that summation, and yet we're often little thought of. We aren't regulated. My hairdresser has more regulations, as I said earlier.
You have a hairdresser?
I do. She's a hairdresser. Her name's Janaka.
Overpaid, but I mean.
She's expensive. But yeah.
All right. So these particular discussion points have to do exactly what you're talking about. So if you're going to bring people in, right, what's something that's really critical if you're going to get a mutual assistance from someone? All right, how do you ensure all your procedures are documented? Right? Have you got them documented?
What are they going to do? What are their edges? What can they do that's legal under that mutual assistance agreement to yourself? What isn't? Right? Like in our particular agreement with y'all, I can't touch anything. I'm not allowed to touch any of your systems. That's the whole way I maintain my protection. If I were to violate that, I bet I would violate most of my protections, to that point Drew made earlier of this piece of kind of the tacit nature of this protection. But how documented are you? If you're watching right now, how well documented is the procedure to restore a machine? How well documented is the procedure of how you're going to engage this client and follow this process? Like, those are the things you're trying to get at right here, Bob, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's it, right? Because if you're going to get, if you're in a peer group and they send people for you to help, I mean, you're going to want to, give them something that's, can be trained up on quickly, which means you got to have the procedures documented. And like restoring workstations is one of the easier things to do, as far as just imaging them and getting them moving, right? Well, even if you want to do something like that, not customize it for all their bookmarks or anything yet, but just get them back up. You got to have those procedures documented, and they got to be actually, they got to be correct, right? And you have to, and for them to be correct, you have to at least review them periodically to make sure that they're still correct, right? So there's overhead, but I mean, as an MSP, in our case, we're fortunate, right? Because we're a SOC 2 Type 2 compliant organization, so we're forced to keep our procedures and processes and policies in place and auditable, and have that review process and that review cycle. So we're comfortable, with being able to do that. But that's the point of this exercise. If you're an average MSP or even an enterprise and you're trying to get some help from an MSP because your resources are taxed trying to deal with an internal situation, you got to be able to do that, right? You got to have the discipline to have those things well documented. That's what the series of questions is about in this case.
Yeah. Any MSPs out there that still argue, do I even want to be a process-oriented company? I'll tell them myself, right, Tom? I got a chuckle out of you. Okay, go, Tom. I go.
No, I'm, as much as I jokingly push against it. Process and procedure is how I started my IT career. Documenting it. We were one of the first IT departments. I worked IT for a large Ford supplier. We were ISO 9001 certified, and we certified our IT department before Ford required it back in 1999. That's when we got our certification. By 2001, we got our Q1 flag from Ford. And we included the IT department, even though at the time that was even optional. So the importance of documenting process, procedure, everything, ringed binders. I was doing those printed all the way back then with all procedures that could be replaced. And that was 24 years
I was the antithesis. I literally sat back one day. I was the A player in my mind, at least. Maybe I find out now I was actually just a little, tiny little fish, big pond. But the point is that, I was that guy, and I was saying to our CEO, do we even want to be a process-oriented company? Like, why don't we just hire all A players that can do things well and that understand stuff? And I'll tell myself, I was that idiot. I genuinely said those words. Now, that was like 15 years ago, so give me like a grain of salt. But, I'm so dumb. And I look back now and it's like, if you don't have something repeatable, it's not defensible. It probably didn't happen, right? Is that kind of the argument we all have here, or believe at least today?
No one used the visionary that you are, Matt. I can see that happening in the past.
I was so dumb. Yeah.
Well, I like the third bullet talking about developing a culture of documentation.
Yes.
I worked in an organization that we were an ITIL certified process shop, right? Everything was documented. Everything was done. It was great. There was a multi-year initiative to get all that done, and everything was documented well, repeatable, survivable, etc. But then through a few years of attrition, some new people came in, replaced the old people, and when you go through this a couple of times, you get a few iterations away from that cultural documentation. And then now, while we have all this documentation, it hasn't actually been updated timely. And the folks who've joined the organization the last 18 months have no idea that it even exists. And we're back to just tribal knowledge. And we all talk about the risk of tribal knowledge and the challenge there. But when you're operating with tribal knowledge and you actually have like 600 document sets of everything that you need to do, no one just knows they exist. That's the most bang your head against the wall thing ever.
And you can't underestimate how much the documentation costs. This is literally a discussion we had on a live stream with me and Jason Slagle yesterday, where we were talking about the fact that he's got friends that work for the local to me and Jason, our Nuclear Regulatory Commission, because they work at the plant there, and how much procedures they are. And they heard numbers, and we haven't validated this, but they said it's about 10% of their budget just maintaining documentation, because they have a process and procedure for everything at these plants that is absolutely gone through. There's a team of people that's all their job is to create the documentation, validate the documentation, update the documentation, and the cycle is never ending. It's a percentage of their budget and a noticeable one.
That data checks out, though, Tom. Yeah. Like in our organization, I had Ben. Ben's job was as an FTE. His whole FTE job was documentation translation. We had a Slack channel. Everybody would put the changes in it. Now, don't beat me to death on my process. Remember, moons ago. But the point was, Ben's job was to take that and translate it. And guess what? Then we had TAMs, or technical account managers, whose job was to test, right? And to check the documentation and make sure that it actually was correct. And that as we went through this, it was right. And to your point, Drew, like if you don't build a culture, you don't add those checks in so that when the help desk finds something just a little wrong, they send in that message. And when then that comes back to that IA or infrastructure admin, they find something just a little wrong. They have a place, a path, their job affords them to do it. Their ticket time affords them to do it. In our case, we ended up having to have an FTE. That's what he did. Was because that was our path to solve that in a way that made it so that the culture could be adopted to, and they could still meet their other things they were doing in that line. So
there is a way to manage through the situation, right? I mean, in our case, we have processes and procedures, but we memorialize them in our systems, right? So they're not stale pieces of paper sitting on the shelf, right? They're actually encoded in workflows in our systems, and our people have to use those workflows every day to actually accomplish all of that, right? So that way, when we get into a situation where the process needs to be modified, well, I mean, it's true as long as the PSA doesn't get nailed down. But I mean, that's what we do, though. We do that to counter having to have a bunch of different binders, right? Because you're right, that's never going to last. You need to memorialize those in your automation as much as possible. That's the way to do that.
And it does take it back to like continuous integration, right? And this continuous need to, that documentation must be both used and then modified as it is used, right? Like it can't just be something that's a binder. And it was, right, Dom? That was the point of it. It was when the IT guy got hit on his motorcycle. I'm about to take my dog on a motorcycle ride after this, so like I'm horrified that we're talking about it this way. So if I go missing,
I'm going on a motorcycle ride too. So
yeah, okay, good. Me and Tom both are gone after
we'll go somewhere together.
Oh man. All right, how we doing? We got pieces assigned. 5 seconds left. We're gonna get more than zero.
MacKenzie's on it now. They've got it going on.
I gave integrated motors. I got their servers up. I felt like that.
I played beer pong with MacKenzie. I know MacKenzie is a winner. She wants to win. Period. I mean, I won.
Yeah, slowly glazing over.
Yeah, she's competitive. You can tell.
Oh, so here's a question I have: is that tech lead component that there's that one? I can't assign that. MacKenzie, is that one that you've been able to assign all along, just didn't know about it?
Yeah, that's probably true.
It's cruel game makers that just set you up for failure and set chaos.
It does.
I hate them. I hate them.
What's gonna happen at the end is none of my assignments will matter, and then I'll.
So I was going to say this particular set of questions, because this first question might seem weird. Why is distinct infrastructure important? During the scenario, right? One of the things we talk about is the fact that one of your customers, it turns out they've got a startup that's actually using their infrastructure.
Oh, that never happens.
Right?
Never happens.
So that's what these questions are about. It's like, okay, well, when it turns out you've got one of your companies, one of your customers actually has another startup, maybe a spinoff from their organization, that's a separate legal entity using their infrastructure. Why is it important to know that? What are you going to do to keep, to be able to discover that and/or deal with it from a contract?
And does it matter? Why could it?
Or does it matter?
Anybody?
Right.
Well, I mean, you're not responsible for them technically, right? From the liability side.
Sure, maybe. Depends on where the liability came from, right, Mac? Like, what if I am the causation of this compromisation? Where does that line get blurred in that conversation?
Phew.
Yeah, because our agreement is with the parent company. The subsidies become a different, I don't have an SLA with the subsidy. So,
yeah. And I guess the point I'm trying to bring up with this scenario that we injected when we came up with it is, like, it's all fine and well when you got, I had this one concrete company that then bought this other little company, and then they were going to spin it off. They spun it off. They're like, just use our infrastructure for a while, and it's cool. And then you kind of just support it because you're like, I already made the agreement. It's not that much more. It's about making sure that you have those legal agreements between those entities. And it's about making sure that if you are going to have this commingled resource, that you just have a clear definition of where you're responsible for, right? And the other piece of it is, what if you take one entity that has a lower risk and regulatory risk that then creates some spinoff for neuroscience or something that goes into that highly regulated space, and now you have taken an information system and exposed it to significantly more stringent requirements and risks that need to be dealt with there potentially, right? That's the fear that I have, and the intention of this talk, a conversation point, I think. Does anybody have this happen? Tom, do you ever have this mingling of company resources for companies?
Yeah. In the freight forwarding world is the way they get around laws is spinning up other companies because you can't have certain aspects of freight managed by a single company. So you divide your company up, which you just put all your kids in charge of it. And then it becomes a whole different complexity because they have to be legal separate entities, but they all end up being in the same building and relying on the infrastructure because that's not,
Wow.
Yeah, it becomes, we good news, we never had an incident with them, but it's like deciding who's going to pay the bill, where does it get allocated. We actually have some property management companies that create some of the same problems because when you operate at large scale for property management, which you may not realize is, or it could be a parent company, but frequently, if you look up, there's a ton of addresses registered as businesses. They register them as a separate company. So there's a holdings company that may hold these companies for certain pieces of it, then the companies themselves, and then they want to split the bill too. It is something that you need to have a good understanding for because it is hard, because especially your technicians go, are these the same company or not? What is this address here of just the name? Why does that exist? And why do I have to send the bill? There's a lot of nuance to it that you really have to sit down and make sure you understand their infrastructure and how they want it built and how they want it applied.
Yep.
Yeah, Tom, that reminds me of my college days in the state of Tennessee. You couldn't sell beer and liquor in the same place, so they just put a plexiglass wall right down the middle with a door. So,
Exactly right.
Like,
you got a thing, right?
Problem solved. Segmented. We're good.
Yeah,
exactly.
Some of the same concepts. It becomes. I understand why they do it, because they want to build cost centers around each of these individuals, and there's advantageous to build cost centers where you put it all in its own company or own LLC name, so you can expense the costs against that. The problem is when the Wi-Fi is not working in a building, we generally want to bill from where the master head of that end is. But instead, they're like, "Oh, you replace the wiring." That gets billed to that building. But you're the company that manages the property and you own it. Yeah, we own it, but we also spun it into its own separate. So yeah, some of the nuances we deal with these large companies like that is fun.
Yep.
And that's the takeaway. Maybe review your agreements with your partners and make sure that you actually are covered from a legal agreement. I mean, this is probably making Eric Tills roll over in his grave right now.
It is 100%. 100%.
All right, are we gonna win? We're close to day 14 and 15. Like we're getting really close to finishing.
Day 15 is when it stops. So we're
so hopefully we've got how many are up? So do we have any clients completely up?
Innovative Financial. You can see that one right there.
Oh, well, thank God. I can
Premier Energy,
stock trades.
Premier Energy, Global Hauling.
Yeah.
Progressive
And by the way,
Fuels,
people are like, you
Integrated
should have these
Bank.
in order. I'm like, it's not my fault when this Excel sheet was printed out. It was not in order by company name. It was in order by something else.
Make it more realistic.
Yeah, this is intentional.
Yes. Yeah, we get beat up about it. We actually, I can tell you, we debate all the time internally. Like, well, we can make this easier, and we go, yeah, we don't want to make it easier.
I don't want to make it easier. I want this to look horrible and be terrible, like reading with your index finger down an Excel sheet.
Make sure you scroll down.
You have to imagine I missed a point where MacKenzie's like, wait, there's more?
I mean, I did let you go a couple days.
I don't get why do we keep getting people firing us? I don't even see those things.
Well, they keep freeing up more resources for us.
Put that on your checklist. Check for scroll
of that
bars,
incident, every client fired ultimately, every employee quit ultimately, right? The company became a shell of a company that we acquired, Voldemort.
Am I getting less tech leads too over the game?
None of them have committed suicide yet, MacKenzie. So no, probably the same numbers of tech leads, I guess. You might have gotten some temporary resources for a bit there.
So-and-so has resigned. What?
Yeah. We have had that play out, right? Because someone has resigned.
There's a couple injects.
In these injects where, somebody's like, I mean, imagine this is not your first time dealing with ransom. This isn't your second time for that same client. You're going back to Sally's, chocolate factory again. And now the third time. You imagine you want to walk into that? Tell me you want to go in and look those people in the eyes, or in my case, one eye, and say that to them, right? No, you don't want to deal with it. So you might decide, I'm done. In fact, there was an MSP in our game earlier that he said, yeah, this happened at this other one. It was grossly negligent. We had left the server open, and I don't work there anymore because I couldn't get them to do that. I work at this new one, right? Like, yes, they might literally decide they don't want to take that trauma right now. Like, that's the reality.
I can tell you why we probably dodged the inject of technicians quitting, because we have a policy on technician wellness. That particular configuration right there probably counters the fact that we were.
About that.
Yeah.
Are you using over-the-counter drugs or actual prescription narcotics to keep them well?
Elephant tranquilizers? They're much cheaper.
That's a helpful one. They are cheap.
We're working with the trucking associations and what they use.
There. Okay.
Oh, here we go. BAAs, Business Associate.
Yeah.
Let's talk about BAAs.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, all right. They're critical. You love them. Why do you have to have them, and do you have them if you're out there? Like, is this something that matters, and why does it matter?
You talk to, they may not matter. So that's happened recently. I've experienced.
The big things here is like, who's actually responsible for there being a BAA agreement in place? That's really the big question that most people don't know. But I mean, in reality, it's the healthcare organizations who's responsible for that regulation. Yep. So they're the ones that need to be the ones that make sure it's in place if they need it. So again, another thing as an MSP, we have in our MSA as a generic part of our master MSA is if you are responsible for compliance that relates to BAAs and we must have one, it's your responsibility to get it to us, and here's how you send it to us so that we can officially receive it.
And at the end of the day, the other piece of this to talk about is like some of the complex conversations that come up is like, what are your obligations if you know of potential PHI loss? Or we talk about this mandatory reporting kind of thing in several places, but not really here. And, Tom, you made a comment when I was speaking earlier about it is the Wild Wild West. Well, here's one of those where this is a weird one, because the company itself theoretically is responsible for talking about their incident and dealing with their PHI loss, right? Is that a fair agreement amongst all of us at this point, that ultimately they're the ones responsible to file their incident and what happened?
Yeah, they do the actual reporting of it.
Yes,
that's correct. What about when you caused it? You're now the MSP that got compromised, and that means that these underlying clients got compromised, data was compromised in X field, and we have a violation of the C of the CIA triad in the confidentiality of that PHI has been compromised. Now you've caused it. You are not necessarily the reporting entity of that data from that particular covered entity, but you're aware of it, and they're making a decision not to file and go.
Not
what do you do? Yeah, they're saying, I'm not going to report this incident. That's the scenario I'm making. It's horrible. It'll talk about it.
But you're in a weird situation. You gave them the evidence. You documented you get it. You have your lawyer. You address legal counsel. Let you know that I don't think they're going to tell the proper authorities about this, but we told them.
Yeah. And at some point, I don't know, with some of the FTC stuff coming out on reporting, I would be more concerned about my business.
Yeah. I mean, the big thing is we talked about the incident response plan, the language, et cetera. But with PHI, with PHI, with PII, with anything privacy related or health related, all states that are having updates it's now no longer an MSP relationship or a customer vendor relationship. It's the data custodian, it's the data processor, it's the data sub-processor, and those are very distinct, different roles, and that's something that should be in our MSA or our statement of work, to be able to clearly say what is our responsibility as a processor or a sub-processor, so that we have a defensible position of we did what we were supposed to, and council had approved when we entered into this, that this is the relationship that we have. Because if there's PHI that they are the custodian of, but we process on their behalf, the custodian has the full responsibility to report, but we want to make sure that we followed all, not just our contractual obligations, but any of the obligations with any PHI regulations for HIPAA or for any other privacy rules.
Tell me you're in a room full of professionals when you're doing this IRGame without telling me you're in a room full of professionals while doing this game. Like,
yeah, I know. I told you. I said that early on. I said it's cheating when you play with guys like this, right? I mean, it's just
The good news is I think the companies, compared to where they were years ago, today they take things a lot more serious, because if the Uber case taught us anything, is that you can't call a breach a surprise pen test. Turns out that won't fly.
Oh my gosh! But
I want to get that T-shirt made. That wasn't a breach. That was a surprise pen test.
Yeah. Well, I love the surprise administration by the FBI statement. But the point is, the takeaway that was really, really critical. Tom said it. Drew said it. That is, I don't make that decision. Council does. I don't make that decision. Council does. I run this by council. I have to understand the nature of my data custodian, my data processor. I'm actually the data owner. Am I the person that's the data? And then at this point, because we're so into this right now, you already have the governance or the guidance of council, and maybe somewhat the governance of council in this regard. And Drew, you and Tom both tackled that, right? That you need to make sure you're leaning on those resources when you're dealing with this. They'll have better answers than I will, typically, is the point.
Allocation day. We're only one day away from compliance.
Last one. This is it. And then we're judged based on our actions here. Did we save little Timmy or not? This is the game.
Save integrated motors. No.
They are under the safeguards rule. Maybe we need to care about them more now because they're handling financial.
The SEC, right? They're carried under the SEC.
Yeah. No, don't say that. So I should be ignoring them.
So here's the business realization that I think is funny is now, since we know we're down to the last day, it's not necessarily assigning resources to critical partners. It's the ones that I know I could get.
I know it's the wins. Now you're shifting to a win mentality.
Is it more people I got up? Okay, hold on. Maybe
screw greater good. Let's get money in my pocket.
Yeah, but I feel like the state government services are repeatable contracts because they don't.
They're
Yeah,
certainly
but
hard to
could that also be prosecutorial, right? I don't necessarily need.
True. You know, you joke about that, but there was this.
What am I, CEO and CFO? What do you think? Should I focus on healthcare because it's important, or should I? Oh, did you say yes?
I'd focus on the money if I'm going to be that guy.
Are you going to focus on what makes you win the game?
Oh, the money. Wait, I'm just kidding. No, it's several factors.
I'm not. Yeah, we're not giving you that.
We were it was working in this little tiny county, and the guy that I was doing, it was when early in my career, he was doing a project to redo their jail management software and their jail software. And then the sheriff looked at him and he was serious as a heart attack. And he says, Bodie, if you do not finish this jail management cutover, I will offer you a cell, Wi-Fi, and a laptop for the remainder of the project. And I genuinely think he meant it. Like he was in that legal capacitance or gray enough area to give him 72 hours of time in that cell. Anyways, I digress. Okay, last piece is get them pawns assigned where we can do the most good. There's too many devices at Future Resources. There's too many devices at Universal Public Sector. Can we get all devices back up and restored? Which, by the way, we did learn earlier, just so I can break the fourth wall, that if I was a technician, one of the first things I would do is get the servers up and then get some representative server workstations up to get the most critical functions up. And we do not reward us in this game right now for that. And that is a reality of incident. You would definitely get that back up and get people to some degree of functionality as a primary means. So telling on ourselves.
All the servers are up except for those dudes that fired me. But I feel like
not grudged at all. Not grudged at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like it known that they definitely fired MacKenzie because until the servers were up, I couldn't do anything. So
you got two Texans.
They didn't fire all of us. They fired MacKenzie. I do love that. That's
I said I was a scapegoat at the beginning of this. So I'm already on LinkedIn, like
open for work. Yeah.
Actively exactly.
You know, one of the things that this particular inject for topic is a good one is, you know, what we're really trying to get down to is root cause analysis. And one of the things that came up in our earlier topic was, you know, when I was looking at this, no matter where I sat as an MSP, I did not want to be the expert in the room. No matter where I was, I didn't want to be the one that was going to go to court and argue against the other company and say, yes, forensically, this is correct, repeatable, accurately gathered, information we can trust and trust. I didn't want to be that. And so when it came to that, I had a third party. Your insurance company is going to assign someone to do root cause analysis and they're going to do some of that, at least initial, how did the incident start? But it goes beyond that, not just how did it start, but how did we get here? How did we create a condition that this is now going to be what happened, right? This technician was working from home and we didn't treat their machine like an asset, right? How do we create all of the scenarios that got us there? So let's open up the floor on just what about root cause analysis? Why is it important? And do we have to take lessons learned from an incident out of this?
I would say always we want to start with like, how did it happen right down to the detail? You know, I love when I see a really good differ report and I can go through them. They're my favorite ways to understand cybersecurity is because I read through the reports. I see how, you know, that site that they had set up. The LastPass one was a really good walkthrough.
That's the one I was alluding to, right? The home user, the Plex server, the pivot.
Exactly. The Plex server, the pivot, the lateral movement. There's a lot to take in there. And I think that's really, you can really understand how those one little string was found. You know, and that what led to a series of things, or the phone company. I can't remember their name right now. The phone 3CX. They were targeting them with a trading app, a marketing, like what do you call that? Like stock trading app.
It was trading for. I thought it was for Bitcoin exchanges, but maybe
no, it wasn't for Bitcoin exchange. It was actually a stock market app that they downloaded an old version. It had a back door in it. When you're reading through it, you're just like, wow, that's pretty targeted. That this person on there, did they target the person? This is, we don't know. Or was this back door there for a while? And when someone realized it, it then got sold to the initial access broker. So go, wow, guess what this person has access to? This is the root of all the 3CX apps that go on desktops. What can we do with this? And those are when you start looking at that, and then you think, okay, there wasn't good application level control. They obviously had permission to install things on the same system that also had permissions to be the master server to do the builds for the software. That should never be. It really gives you those insights of where those edges are. Okta, same thing.
And we've done this live a bunch, right? Tom, you, myself, and Jason's Legal love to pick apart modern incidents and go, here's a failure in CIS. Here's an exact example where this was not done, right, as evidenced by this.
Yep.
And I love getting those broken down. But when you get to that root cause analysis, I think a lot of people miss having a process to actually fix it.
Yes.
Right. I think that's one of the things that common comes out. Drew or Mac or Bob, anybody want to speak towards like that challenge and, how do we deal with, making sure we actually wrap around and hopefully be better next time in that regard?
Anytime in my organization that we have a vulnerability that has led to a full compromise, there's several components along the kill chain that got missed, right?
Yeah, of course.
The idea of unwinding it all the way back to the beginning ensures that if I go back 3 steps and I go, oh yeah, we fixed this, great, but I didn't go back to the very beginning, there may be other flaws in the kill chain for us that we didn't address. Because this particular CVE, this particular 0 day, whatever was the initial root cause, might be something that we fix, we patch, whatever. But that's always the initial point of compromise. We then didn't have additional detection, we didn't have additional segmentation, additional alerting and containment. So if you don't go that far back in full detail, you've left, you might have shut a door, but there's 2 windows that are unlocked and you didn't realize it.
Yeah, I think that's key with ransomware, since this is a ransomware situation specifically, is not just points of persistence that they can come back into, but if you don't find root cause, then you risk getting reinfected. And then, what Tom was playing off of is a lot of these cases, a lot of the supply chain based attacks started because it was root cause identification and other investigations helping other organizations or the vendor in the first place. And we as DART did not even guarantee that we would find root cause, because there were many cases where you have time stomping, anti-forensics, or situations where root cause is not picked up for that very reason. And those are probably more APT nation state attacks.
Yep.
But that's hiding and blending into normal, is if they can hide how they got in, they're more likely to hit either similar organizations or the same organization again.
Yep. Absolutely.
And we got
I want to roll back to one of the big lessons learned from Equifax from a few years ago, which one of the huge takeaways, if you dive into that incident, they had a certificate that expired and they notified a group of people, a large group of people. I can't remember, it was like 60 people. So when you tell 60 people, did you know a certificate expired and no one person knows they're the one that's supposed to fix it? You just told everyone. Everyone knew it was broke. No one knew who was supposed to not break it.
That goes back to that matrix, doesn't it? Of this accountability that MacKenzie was talking about, how important in an incident, even if all the other stuff isn't dusted, some degree of that accountability and who's responsible. And if you just holler out the 60 people, there's no accountability of who's necessarily responsible for that particular action. To your point.
That's, there's a frequency of, I don't know if anybody knows, but there's a frequency of certificate attacks, right? And a lot of these things. I
Would it be
noticed
at
that
the
one
time of
because
their expiration?
there was an aspect of it in the SolarWinds one, right? And then, like you were talking about the Equifax one, then most people have forgotten that those certificates are actually really critical. They're old school technology, but it's still the root basis for a lot of how everything works, right?
They're literally called root certificates sometimes.
Yeah,
right?
for a reason.
Yeah, 100%.
We have an inject, so because of the burnout for our employees, they're only working at half efficiency.
So they're not getting stuff done as quickly.
So whatever they were capable of restoring, it gets cut in half.
So
I think we should also be real that this happened around day 10, not day 15.
It's true. It's a lagging indicator. We
have a really good policy on wellness. That's the only thing that saved us.
Yeah.
Wellness policy needs to be revised.
We may have a new definition of wellness at this stage.
Yeah. Everybody got a free Fitbit. That didn't help.
Oh man! All right, day 15. We're winners, right? We're gonna win here, yeah. Like we're gonna
we should get a score.
Most we've ever seen is what, 7
points?
Where's
the score? I feel like I really.
Oh, it's coming.
You don't get it till the end.
There was one that only had 2 more down. I think I'm almost go at one of the
scroll. You have to. I'm trying to add my value here. I think you have to scroll for that one.
No.
Health.
Man. If she could crawl through that screen, dude.
I know, and I'm gonna have to see her in person at Beyond. She may cut me.
Like you're gonna see me soon enough.
Yeah, I'll see you soon, bud. Oh, I'm at RSA. Yeah, I'll be there next week. Yeah,
cool.
right.
Well, then I'll see you there in the back.
I won't tell you which panel I'm leading. Maybe we could get a rematch on the beer pong. You know, if you want to win back your glass boot.
All right, so this is the last 5 minutes, so we're on day 15. So
all right, here we go.
This is about discussing, hey, what you guys think about the exercise? And
so maybe let's ask the chat. There's 30 of you or so still here. Like, what about this? I mean, put yourselves in our shoes. Play through this in that way with your team in your mind. Like, does this bring up good discussion points for you? Are there things that you had aha moments from us? Like, let's light up the chat a little bit. Prove me you're still awake at 5 o'clock on a Friday or whatever it might be now, 6 o'clock on a Friday.
6 o'clock, yeah, I think. East Coast. It's only 4 o'clock.
Well, especially for you guys that are CISOs, right? I mean, it's, does it have value? Is it something that, what I mean? That's really what we're after here, is because we're trying to get people to talk about and discuss those cases that they may not do on.
Everyone's reviewing their SLAs and MSAs right now.
They're already done. They're like, no, we're working right now.
He calls our lawyers.
Our attorneys have advised us to no longer continue chatting in this particular engagement.
You know what though? But like third-party vendor risk management, while that is the least sexy thing about information security, is more and more critical. Looking at those SLAs, looking at as much as our internal incident response process is valuable. Looking at those contractual obligations with the third parties and what you can even ask them to do. Is significant.
I did a talk at a little private invite. It was 120 of like Fortune 100, Fortune 500 CISOs, and I did a talk called "Nobody Gives a Fuck About Fazio," and what I started with was saying, and I did actually say it on stage. Got a huge laugh. I was totally winning, but I said, okay, this is a Target logo. Anybody remember this breach from 2013 November or so? Everybody, of course, in the room condescendingly said, yes, of course we remember this. Stupid. Why are you asking? And then I said, okay, number 2, who remembers how it happened? And they said, of course, HVAC. About half of them are like HVAC vendor, third party, right? We got you. Bringing up old stuff.
You're like, wrong.
And then the last one was, how many of you remember the name of that HVAC company? Don't Google. Tell me the name of that small business that was involved in that. And it's Fazio's Mechanical Services. And nobody gives a fuck about Fazio, but 10 years later, they remember you. And the argument is that I went on to go is that their third-party risk is being assessed improperly and that they don't fully understand some of this breadth of the SMB and the impact that it has in their world and how it's poorly managed in a lot of cases. And I went on to argue that you should look at the MSP and you should ask the MSP, have you done a tabletop? Have you dealt with identity management? How do you deal with asset management? How do you deal with, right? And asking open-ended questions to lead towards that discussion and understanding. So anyways, but I guess I went off on a story time because that's my jam. But what did y'all learn, Tom? What did you take out of this, man?
The wonderful Mike Tyson quote on cybersecurity. Nobody has a plan to get in the face.
Yeah, fair. It's very cyber relevant. I understood it.
Yeah.
First time.
One of those things, I think table talking, it's always so underrated and so important. It's how you get better at it. It's the military way of putting the reps in whatever that procedure is that you're responsible for. And all of us have a responsible role to play in an incident like this, but putting the reps in. So you have a procedure, you know what your job is, you know what your role is. So when you're doing it under duress, you're doing it under fire, you understand without question, these are the steps, these are the processes we're going to follow. This is how we're going to do it. You've put the reps in, you put the time in, and you just becomes automatic in nature to it. You watch incident responders because they go from place to place to place and do incident response. They work like a machine going there. They're like I've seen the drama. I know what to turn off. I know what to ignore them, and I know where to look to start this process. And they just get to work. It's how you get that way is going through these as an MSP, because you hope to never actually have to do it. I want to be able to just fire drill over and over and over again. So if that day comes, and you hope it doesn't, that you can just run through it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the premise.
Anybody else? What'd you take away today? Anything?
I think my number one takeaway is the other famous Mike Tyson quote talking about information security. If your team's not working hard enough, just bite their ear off.
Oh,
I say that as a joke because.
What was the Benjamin Franklin quote? I felt like that was also a good.
Yeah.
The hang.
We don't work together. We'll hang individually.
Yeah, exactly.
But the reason I said that is because I think while obviously we didn't have an incident response plan, we had technical challenges, we had resource allocation. The funny thing is, through all of the technical capabilities that we're talking about, it all came down to availability and efficacy of human capital. We had actual people that we needed to assign to go do work, and taking care of the people. Wow, we didn't take care of the people. We got 1 out of 10. But taking care of the people is absolutely critical to any success.
Yeah. I think this is a bug in the alpha software.
I think this is not. I think this game is right. You lose, right? Regardless.
Yes. A fair game. Yes.
Our CFO gave us no valuable intelligence on where to go.
I find that to be the case in causation too. Can we mark that as our root cause analysis on this failure?
I blame whoever made Tom the CFO.
See, now we're getting a real root cause analysis here.
Yeah.
And we've seen 6s. I think there actually could be some scoring issues going on. I'm not sure.
No. With the number, it is.
Well, why did we get a 1?
Zero.
Well, the amount of them. Well, there's a rubric about how much revenue you save. That's one of the scoring. That's one of the scoring criteria. It's the number of clients you retained, right? We got a total of 24. It's how many you did out of the 24. After a while,
I started looking at users and then thinking, okay, screw what's.
Yeah, that's where it comes back to revenue. Right?
How many seats are there per organization that could potentially for revenue?
No guidance from the CEO from Joshua. I think also to take this point from Joshua, which is good to see you, buddy. The baseline abilities for each role probably could be defined a little better at the beginning of the scenario rather than explained on the fly. I agree with that. I'm not sure how we do that better, but I agree with you. I don't know how else to say it. Is the point. So it would help them mimic their real managers, know what their capabilities are. To your point, MacKenzie didn't know that she could move this tech lead until later, even though it was in the words. It's just about making that better.
I didn't know to scroll. I think that was
and the scrolling will get you.
Where no CEO and CFO told me to scroll.
But we intend to make this better, and Bob and team are working hard on making changes every day. There's some awesome UI changes coming too. They're going to be fantastic.
Well, honestly, MacKenzie, I am the CEO, and I did tell you to scroll. So but it was after too.
This was an
just to be accurate, to be 100% accurate. So
yeah.
So after I started checking up on your work, I said, "Oh, hey, she maybe need to scroll." That's all. Hey, man, I want to tell you guys, thank you so very, very much for doing this with us, man. It was a real pleasure.
It was a blast. Thanks, Drew, and Tom
eight players in the seats.
We lost Wes.
Yeah, and
we even lost Wes.
Yeah. We outlasted Wes.
Are we literally turning the lights out as we walk out? We're like,
no, I am. I've got the button. I literally have the final button. So yeah, I can shut it all down.
The lights button. Okay, good.
I do actually have the light switch to shut it out on the way.
Well, thank you to everybody.
I just want to say thanks, man. This was awesome. I appreciate it. It was great. It was a great exercise. So,
see you, buddy.
Thank you very much. So everybody online still. See you next time. I'm sure Wes and them will be letting you know when they got another activity going on, man. But thanks very much for sticking around with us and doing this late night run.
Gonna go not die on my motorcycle.
All right, guys. Thanks, everyone.
Me too. Take care, man.
Have fun. See you next time.